a beautiful day here in Southern California. Today's discussion is about my life's mission. See, what I'm interested in doing is going back to college. I'm interested in earning a PhD in psychology. The main interest for me is, based upon my belief that, modern psychology is a profound and powerful social institution, with many, many people dedicated and committed to addressing, the human condition, in a powerful and meaningful way. And what there is for me to say about modern psychology is, while it's profoundly powerful at describing, human behaviors, articulating patterns, and making, generalized connections to, childhood environments and other factors that could be attributed to the development of psychology itself and the personalities and behaviors and emotionality of people in adulthood. The truth is that psychology profoundly misses the mark. When I look at a world dominated by mass shootings, political divisions where people grapple with the very fabric of reality itself, considering that that's some kind of modern policy discussion, I can't help but, declare a bit of a failure. That with all our therapy, with all our modern medicine, with books like the DSM-5 getting thicker and thicker, I'm very aware that there is, a problem, and the problem is that people are led to believe that it is natural to live as an adult in 2023, fearing abandonment, living in perpetual adolescence or childhood, unable to discern the intentions and motives of other people, perpetually stuck in a vicious cycle of efforts to fix and change oneself, to determine what's wrong with me, to improve perpetually, to strive for perfection in nearly an inescapable phenomenon of analytical suffering that merely perpetuates these underlying thoughts, where despite all the book reading, despite all the therapy, despite all of the interventions, people are still left to grapple with their own lack of capacity in addressing matters of importance to them. And people suffer in relative isolation, failing to acknowledge or recognize that every single man, woman, and child is stuck within the same perpetual experiences, regardless of demographic, regardless of material prosperity, or even what society they are a member to, what God they choose to worship. There is a fundamental conundrum with the human experience, this vast wealth of knowledge and intelligence, yet the seemingly inescapability with respect to repeating our own personal histories and the history of humanity itself. And yet, many of the challenges of the mind have been solved for centuries, if not thousands of years. And the issue that I see is that the lens of modern psychology fails to acknowledge the validity of the so-called mystical or spiritual experiences, or the enlightenment of the Buddha, or even the experience of being born again within Christian theology, something very much obscured by the modern beliefs that have come to replace the teachings and open-mindedness with rigid dogma and fear. However, people have aspired towards profound levels of personal freedom, profound levels of personal awareness, profound levels of peace of mind, even within a world of all the challenges that we currently face. Yet, these experiences have yet to be validated in a manner in which they make their way into modern psychotherapy. That the truth of the matter is, I can talk with somebody that has undergone 20 years of psychotherapy, has been diagnosed with nearly inescapable mental afflictions like borderline personality disorder, and in under 2 hours, I can have this person nearly 100% of the time experiencing everything, nothing. What might take a Buddhist monk 20 years to achieve can be had within an hour. That the very foundation of psychology is ontological in nature, that what we describe and what we consider to be trauma-based in terms of the suffering of adults has absolutely nothing to do with trauma at all. That there is an undeniable structure when it comes to human personality and identity that has its framework simply be nothing less than the animal fight or flight reaction. Except instead of reacting and responding to a gazelle or a hippopotamus as a lion might, the human being responds to the objectified version of themselves and attaching to the perceived threat in the same exact psychological dynamic as a lion might respond to a hippopotamus or a hyena. Because you see, the fight or flight mechanism of nature is actually an intellectual process of discernment, a pattern recognized emotional reaction, a prevailing anxiety-based stress reaction with patterns of discernment which would inform the animal on how to react and respond. This is a necessary mechanism for all organisms with a brain, because you see, a brain is a profound and powerful tool for navigating a three-dimensional world outside. And when you consider all of the infinite behavioral responses available within any given circumstance, psychology was necessary to take the infinite potential of response and condense it into very short decision-making processes that were profoundly guided by emotions like fear. And human beings have this same mechanism. And what happened to human beings was the genesis of spoken language, where words became symbols as surrogates for objects, people, places, things outside of ourselves, enabling profound levels of communication and ideation in a completely new domain that would be the equivalent of artificial intelligence being generated for the first time. And so human beings, empowered by language, for the first time in the history of all living organisms, to our knowledge, we had the capacity to generate what we now call the self. And an interesting thing happened. What happens is children, free, running around, playing, curious, merely recognizing patterns, opening up a door and watching a toddler just rocket in and run, no awareness of boundaries, race, gender, can cross any divide and line. I watched the children at the gym. There was a little boy, and I just saw him shoot through the door and just buzzing, and he runs up to me and he's, hey, and then he runs behind the front desk, and he's there and looking up at people and smiling. And what happens in the human experience is that there is a point in time where this way of existing no longer is going to work. You're going to fall on your face. You're going to be running through your house, 4 or 5 years old, and you're going to knock something down. And your mom or your dad is going to yell, ah, da, 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 da. That was grandma's face. Bad boy. And the child is going to have one of their very first stress reactions. They're going to get triggered. They're going to have a fight or flight reaction. Something is wrong here. An all-encompassing sense of urgency, emergency, and fear. And that something's wrong here is going to correlate to pattern recognition. And the child is going to look at the environment. They're going to listen to what the parents say or whoever it is. And for the very first time, they are going to assign themselves being. They are going to say something. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm broken. And all of the associated emotions of this experience are going to become connected to this interpreted self. And when the child says, there's something wrong with me, and all those emotions become connected to that experience, this is when the child loses a measure of their joy and happiness. And this objectification of self correlates to a segregation of the experience of self out in the world, where now a part of our mind is dedicated to the world of understanding. The world of understanding what's happening, the world of figuring it out, because that is exactly what happens. A child will go, I need to figure this out. And they will discover that they need to generate a new way to exist, a compensatory way of being in the world. I need to be perfect. And perfect can look in this moment like careful. It can look like funny. It can look like nice. It can look like many things. But generally, the first assignment of being will have its underpinnings in a notion of being deficient, not good enough. And this will become a contextual phenomenon of good enough and not good enough. A powerful psychological dynamic that causes the aversion of failure, causes the avoidance of the recreation of this particular experience, guided by the profound and powerful emotions. The child will now move forward with a renewed or new measure of caution. Because it's not just that the child determined there was something wrong with me and that somehow I'm not good enough. They also generated the experience of a world outside of themselves that they were not good enough for. They were not good enough for their mom or for their dad. And this becomes a contextual phenomenon, a perpetual effort to overcome themselves, as when they get triggered in life by listening for and training their attention to anything and everything that could indicate that they are good enough or not good enough. They become attached to the perception of these sources of this particular experience, whereas now I need to be good enough for my mom, for my dad, for my teacher. And that when any animal gets triggered, it is not just a generalized anxiety. It is not just stress. It is an objectified source. For the lion, it's that hippopotamus, and I've got to run from it. Or it's the hyena, and I've got to destroy it. And the stress reaction is arrested and discontinued when the threat is alleviated, when you've run far enough away, or it stops moving. And in the same dynamic, within the human experience, what's wrong with me is resolved when you get an answer, or when something occurs is not good enough and you change the perception of someone else, when you make them happy. When your father says, good job, Nate, then you get the reward of the happiness that was displaced by the all-pervasive sense of being deficient. And the challenge is a world that says you need to be perfect in order to be happy now you can never actually achieve perfection. And so, to some extent, you have surrendered your capacity to ever achieve real fulfillment in life because you'll never achieve perfection. And you never were meant to. That this dynamic was never meant to bring you happiness. It was only meant to give you the illusion of happiness in your future, which would be a motivational instrument for your ongoing and repetitive behavior within the domain of a need to figure it out and fix yourself and fix life. And this is the very basis of all human identity. And its origins are in singular moments. And so as we ruminate and talk to therapists, many of which are completely themselves unaware of this dynamic, we are left to analyze and figure it out and confabulate our past using the same very mechanics of something's wrong with me, the very confusion that children use to bifurcate themselves from reality, to suspend any discernment in an effort to generate the illusion of control through the fixing of the self to appease the parents. That the need to survive other human beings with similar dynamics necessitates children experiencing culpability, guilt, and shame in reaction in relation to the judgment of the people they subordinate to. But this dynamic maintains smallness in adulthood, that people living their lives as adults, fearing abandonment, fearing disappointing others, fearing being not good enough, feeling abandoned at 30, despite having shelter, an iPhone, water, and transportation, we continue to recreate the very exact experiences emotionally that were at the origins of this phenomenon. And what happens is the visual world of experience that once led to a near psychic level of engagement in reality that got us out of the animal kingdom is now the basis of our imperilment, based on the language, because language was not part of the way in which our minds evolved. That when you look at a dog with 3 legs, you'll notice something about the animal, that the animal does not have any notion of brokenness. A cheetah can miss a kill and not feel like a failure because its brother cheetah laughed when it was unable to grab a rabbit. But human beings respond to the circumstances of life by assigning meaning, personal meaning. And this stifles our imagination. This hinders our access to the very dimensions of our own mind that would be a limitless tool for problem solving and discernment. And rather than continuing to grow through experience, we turn to understanding and knowledge, which merely continues to define reality absent experience. Where as we operate within the confusion caused by the triggering of these various experiences, we seek information as to attempt to fix, change, adjust, or understand ourselves as we continue to react and respond to the voice in our mind that ongoingly and perpetually contextualizes reality to be consistent with these very underlying notions themselves. And as we attempt to improve, fix, and change, we fail to recognize the illusory nature of this structure, as well as its perpetual inescapability, that as you act on the impulse of trying to become good enough, you validate the very notion that you are not good enough, therefore severing yourself from fulfillment in the very pursuits that you engage in to try to become fulfilled or happy or loved or lovable. And so as you go through life trying to educate and work trying to seek validation and assimilate. We fail to recognize that that is the condition of everybody else as well. And when you look at it, you see people that, motivated by thoughts of being broken and not good enough, will then be rewarded by the very behavior stimulated by those thoughts, therefore reinforcing the necessity to be the way they think they ought to be. And when they fail, they go right back into not good enough, figure it out, go right back to behaving in the same exact manners. A perpetual effort to readapt and readapt and readapt to all the different dynamic environments of modern life. And then, when confronting the suffering associated with this type of experience, people who share the same experience can go in their quest to problem solve their own mental health challenges and the riddles of their own childhood, will go on to get a PhD, a certification in the thoughts of previous generations of intellectuals who attempted to crack the code of the human mind, all of which have failed to recognize that the very psychology they're describing is merely the byproduct of the beingness of human beings. And as we continue to build upon our internal database of knowledge, trying to explain ourselves, book after book, conversation after conversation, we cannot seem to escape. And the more knowledge we seem to have, the more broken we seem to feel, because we know better. Yet all the knowledge in the world does nothing when the experience of the moment has nothing to do with the knowledge. It has to do with the recreated interpretation of your own brokenness and deficiency, making you susceptible to gaslighting, making you susceptible to manipulation, making you perpetually living in fear of the critique and judgment and feedback of others, an ongoing emotional roller coaster, a yo-yo, where you can be good enough one moment and not good enough the next. And the best you think you can do is attempting to structure a life much like a hamster would, where when you open your garage and you see your car and you think about where you live in the house and your career and the people around you, you generally feel good enough. Your credit score is good, your money is okay, you just got the promotion. And so you build a life in an effort to merely reflect the version of yourself you aspire to be and become. And God hope you don't encounter a narcissist. Oh boy, do they have a lot of fun with you, pushing your not good enough button with emulated behaviors as to simulate anger and disappointment and disapproval. And what do? You attach in the same way a lion might attach to a hyena, attempting to mitigate the threat, attempting to overcome and fix yourself, attempting to make somebody happy. Knowing when you get the validation and the approval for what it is you do, then they will get off of your ass. And it doesn't work that way, does it? Yet, here we have people that tell you, I get to live my life never thinking about being good enough again. I get to live my life never concerning over the validation of other people. I get to live my life where I get to say who I'm being moment to moment. And why would I have the ability to do that? Well, it's because those underlying thoughts and notions that I've described are things that I have let go of. And the letting go of those things is instantaneous. And the methodology that I've developed is one that assists people by taking them away from ruminating and understanding themselves into the world of experiencing themselves in the same manner animals and children do, where rather than having you explain to me why you think you feel this way or tell me about the circumstances of your life, I merely get to write out all of the emotions, all of the thoughts, all the feelings, because people think that I feel not good enough, I feel broken, I feel like there's something wrong with me. Not recognizing that I'm not good enough is not an emotion. Broken is not an emotion. Something's wrong with me is not an emotion. It is merely connected to emotions that are very individualized based on the origins of those experiences and the exact emotional experiences that were present during the moments in which you said those very things about yourself. And since I started coaching people, it has become apparent to me that the world of psychology has done nothing but stigmatize human beings by giving them the answers to the questions of what's wrong or what's broken, saying what's wrong with you is that you have borderline personality disorder or you have bipolar disorder, and failing to even articulate what is going on circumstantially that could also explain these particular emotional experiences. You know, things like borderline personality disorder are thought to be lifelong mental afflictions similar to that of narcissistic personality disorder. And what I'll tell you is that is furthest from the truth, that I wouldn't even characterize it as a personality disorder, that a person with borderline personality disorder is a normally developed human being whose structure of perfectionism and figuring it out was developed like everyone else's. However, in the presence of somebody, say a malignant narcissist, the level of perfectionism and idealization of self, as well as the other, had to reach the pinnacle of dissociation. And the inability to express oneself in an environment of this nature resulted in the accumulation of internal emotions of devaluation, which were not experienced because the triggering emotions are prevalent. They are overriding for any internal emotions. And so the unprocessed and unchallenged emotions that never had the opportunity to be expressed accumulate to a threshold where it results in what we call splitting, which is something you can observe in everyday people pleasing. Because people pleasing is no different than borderline. It's just a matter of severity as it pertains to the process of idealization, the seeing the good in other people, coupled with the I'm an understanding person, which would be the preservation of an idealization of another, like a parent, through trying to understand the dimensions and elements of the behavior of that individual which do not correlate to the depicted idealized version of the parent, which was a necessary mechanism to enable the attachment to remain despite the pathological behavior of the parents. And so the psychology of children is developed in relationship and reaction to parents, and particularly when you have parents with pathological behaviors like narcissists who view the children as mere extensions within their false realities, it has a particular developmental consequence when it comes to the personality itself. That while other children's not good enough and perfectionism might pertain to math homework, the people pleasers pertains to the survival of childhood, requiring idealization as a way to protect the child from discerning the true nature of their parents, as well as a level of understanding and assignment of personal causality as to create the illusion of control and power, that if I can fix myself, I can make mom and dad happy, and then I'll be happy. And so these illusory dynamics of personality go on to prevail in adulthood. And the lack of discernment, the automatic experience of guilt, the open-mindedness within the confusion and desire to understand automatically creates plausibility for direct emotional abuse, where Even entertaining the justifications of a narcissist has already invented the validation of those behaviors. And the emotional attachments to these individuals, based on the prevalence of this fight or flight reaction that is objectified the self as not good enough as being the cause of the distress of the other party, causes the perpetuation of the relationship. And the same emotional experiences that drive the relationship become the basis of the experience during the discard phase. And this is something that both borderline personality disorder and common people pleasers share in common. And what I can tell you is that I can break the idealization of a borderline in one conversation and do so permanently. Permanently. And I can tell you, I've never met a broken person. I've never met a not good enough person. I've never met a person with something wrong with them. I have met people who, much like I did, experience themselves in these ways. And it isn't that we experience these things as permanent, but it's a contextual phenomenon. It's the coin of good enough and not good enough, trying to go from not good enough to good enough. Where healed is happy, something's wrong with me if I'm upset, and people that think that being sad or having bad emotions or so-called negative emotions means that there must be something wrong, and that's often associated with being in environments in childhood where you were punished for the expression of emotions that would reflect poorly on the parents. God forbid you got upset by a narcissistic mother or father, because boy, oh boy, that means you were a bad child. Go to your room. And so you learned how to suppress yourself, how to withhold how you felt, how to put on being nice. And in a world that continues to perpetuate these experiences because of their convenience commercially, having populations of people who believe their happiness is somehow going to come when they have achieved, when they have accomplished, when they could provide, when they've been educated, when they've been promoted, when they've been accomplished. And then the ramifications of people feeling like they just can't keep up anymore in a world of perpetual inflation, where these very psychological dynamics have been very well understood and skillfully kept in place by an education and media apparatus developed with the assistance of Freudian psychology as the basis of modern public relations. And so the truth of the matter is there is a real opportunity for people to not even heal, because you see, even the thoughts of healing, the thoughts and understandings within psychology would presuppose that people have been traumatized or damaged. We even say things like emotional damage. There is no damage. There is no neuronal failure. There is no scar tissue. There is nothing about the human experience that is anything short of illusory, that is merely held together by the architecture of the very language, in that the experience of being is what is at the source of the experience of being a human being. That not good enough is not an emotion. It is a way of being. Broken is not an emotion, it is a way of being. It is literally a manifestation of the experience of oneself in relation to and reaction to the perception of oneself. And we cannot change the self. The transformation of a person exists with an alteration in the perception of the world outside of oneself. That the experience of a person is in response to their perception of the world they live within, the perception of their current circumstances, the perception of their future. And the perception of the future is given by what they think they've already experienced, who they think they are, what they can predict about themselves. And even the way in which they imagine the future is contaminated by these very thoughts that work to corral the imagination, to preserve the comfort zone, a world in which you have already established a measure of competency, and that anything you might aspire would require preparation. You would need to ensure that you wouldn't fail on your first go, and so you don't want to start anything until you can convince yourself that you have the qualifications, or you're good enough, or you have the education, or you've acquired the outside knowledge, which merely would stigmatize your reality and cause profound disappointment when you fall on your face despite all the preparation you could ever embark upon, and there you are, worried about failing. There's nothing to fear, but fear itself is a very profound piece of wisdom, because it is only fear that stops a person, not reality. It is only the meaning in which we assign to the arbitrary circumstances of life that has ever impacted a person, that there is a conflation between reality itself and the contextualization of that reality as to ascertain one's own identity as either good enough or not, healed or broken, loved or unloved, alone or safe, stupid or not. And so I'll share with you some of my notes so you can have a better understanding of exactly what I'm talking about. Because what I'm telling you is that inside of a conversation, I get to watch people discover themselves for the first time. And it makes no difference their age, demographic, beliefs, income, location, race, gender, ethnicity, or any other factor. Yeah, and so here we go. Current emotions in a discard. Boom, 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 boom. 3.5 years old, same emotions. Compensatory way of being, perfect after figuring out, also strong and fundy. This is the meaning they added to life, and this is the actual what happened. Neighbor's house, bedroom. Parents dropped her off. Okay, great. 5 to 6 years old. Invisible, blah, 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 all the same emotions. Bam, 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 bam. 5 or 6 years old, same thing. Gonna be invisible. Oh, wow, invisible, huh? So you feel invisible in life. Wow. What happened there? Conflation between what happened, the meaning, same emotions, recreated. 7 years old. Bum, beam, bum, bum, bum. All these emotions could be 40-some years old. Same exact emotions of a 7-year-old. And when you look, you'll see that the what happened has nothing to do with all these assignments of one's own identity. And so rather than sympathizing, rather than trying to help somebody feel better about themselves, you know, this is what we do. Not good enough? Oh, wow. Well, there's your not good enough. Or you felt abandoned? Well, what happened? Sleeping on the futon, dropped off at daycare. Somebody dropped them off at daycare. And being dropped off at daycare in another country, the child at 4 did not understand. They felt that their mother abandoned them. But once they said all this, afraid, confused, I don't know, once they created for themselves, something's wrong with me, I don't matter, unlovable, hopeless, and broken, they decided they would be perfect. If they could be perfect, then their mom would not abandon them anymore. And in the living of their life, they've never achieved perfection. Therefore, they've never been able to become lovable or good enough. And it never goes away, no matter how much they try. 7 years old. Okay, stupid, useless, blah, blah, blah. Weak, inferior. Yeah, there we go. Same thing. Same thing. Every single human being I talk to can do the same work, same exercises. Now, understanding this makes no difference. This isn't a conversation for understanding. This is a conversation for what's possible in experience. That understanding is a disaster. When you try to understand yourself in relation to your past, you have no access to your memories because psychology trains us to look for trauma. Now, these people have experienced trauma, but the trauma that they've experienced is going to be incorrectly attributed to their current states of suffering, and therefore gives no actual discernible, breakthrough. That just getting comforted by being validated for your suffering is what people do in common talk therapy. People try to challenge you to do things to feel better, try to convince you that you are good enough, which would just be honoring the fallacy of the thought itself. That anything you do as a reaction to these experiences validates them as real and perpetuates them. And it doesn't matter. There's no book for that. There is no pill for that. That, in a very real sense, when they said the truth will set you free, this is what they were referencing. That you would have to dissociate those experiences in language. You would have to let them go, surrender them. And what happens in the moment that a human being recognizes and does this, because this is what we do, that when I put you into a memory of your life, when I take you into the discard and have you describing these experiences, and I just expand it out and say, where else in your life? Oh my God, the person being discarded now recognizes that they felt exactly the same way within the relationship. Wow, and they feel this way with their family. Oh, geez, Louise, this is at work too? You mean also college? And what happens is the Google Earth of your mind has been trained on the smallness of your problems, at the bigness of the emotions of a 5-year-old, too small for this world. And so as you have your mind fixated on trying to solve the riddles of your current stuckness, you're failing to see that this stuckness has been there since you were 5 or 7 years old. And you can't escape it because it isn't even real. That there is no correlation between you being good enough and the behavior of your parents or your teachers or the narcissist or your boss. That there's no such thing as good enough or broken or something being wrong. It doesn't exist. And therefore, it can never be resolved. It can be perpetuated. It can be arrested temporarily. It could be satiated with action. And it results in a profound dissociation from reality, a complete misinterpretation, an abomination of your experience. And yet, here we are in 2023, unable to articulate this as the causation of the bulk of human suffering. And with the help of modern psychology, we can take the 20 years of meditation required for a monk to experience themselves outside the boundaries of their own thoughts and achieve that in a single discussion by getting right to the heart of the challenge. And this isn't theoretical. This isn't metaphysical. This isn't pie in the sky. This isn't anything short of the truth. That for me, I stand upon the shoulders of many people before me. That this isn't about me. This is about discovering that I am no different than anybody on the planet, not any more special or gifted. that you wouldn't be listening to me or knowing who I was had I not seen this for myself. And I would merely call it a coincidence that I am fortunate that I got exposed to some teachings in my 20s. And the result was that my mind was able to then understand that regardless of what I was experiencing, that there was something else available to me. And so in letting go that there's something wrong with me, that I'm broken and that I'm not good enough, created a vacuum, a complete absence of being, a space of everything, nothing, an emptiness, a void. And within that void, I had to put something in place. And the something was, I'm going to make a difference. I didn't put happiness, I didn't put joy. And for that reason, I don't deviate. I don't go, let's get metaphysical, let's get spiritual. No. Because the reality is that no matter what lens we choose to examine the human experience, we're only talking about one thing, the mind. We could look at it spiritually, metaphysically, physiologically, biologically, anatomically, psychologically, sociologically. We can examine it through many lenses, but anything that you do that engages the mind and causes any alteration in any kind of experience, whether you call it a spiritual awakening, you call it enlightenment, you call it transformation, you call it whatever you want, it must also adhere to the rules of psychology. You must also be engaging the psychological structures of personality and experience if you are to find yourself beyond the boundaries of the fear that those dynamics engender. And so, no, I'm not merely a person that has a better vocabulary or more intelligence or somehow, some way develop myself to be able to understand certain things. What happened to me is that when I got out of the way, my mind became free. That the manner in which I experience my memories is so expanded beyond the limitations of the way I used to experience myself that I can look at a memory within my own life and I can see within my imagination within that memory and even confront the very dynamics that I can now share about. And that is without reading books. That is without studying. That I got to a level where I did not need to do that anymore. That there was no more to gain from listening to videos about narcissistic personality disorder. That I had reached a certain threshold where the assertion of understanding would come from the spontaneous and effortless ideation of a mind disinhibited of concerns of self or identity, where the things that I share are not in servitude of a desire to command respect for an expertise or to contest conventional understanding, but merely an authentic effort to convey something that I can see in a very real, visual, and existential as well as experiential manner. And the rate at which the mind functions in this capacity cannot even be compared to the rumination of what people consider to be thinking. That thinking in a way as to engage the voice within your mind that is merely a broken record is a dissociative experience of confusion as opposed to the utilization of a powerful tool of discernment and ideation that attached to the neck of every man, woman, and child is a supercomputer powered by trillions of cells that has the capacity to visualize the whole universe, a galaxy, a solar system. You can sit here with me and picture Earth sitting on the moon. And I could say, fly down there and go hover over Texas. And Why don't you go to Dallas and jump in a Ferrari that's waiting for you? And I want you to just drive to California with me right now. And I want you to be going down Pacific Coast Highway, and you're going to pull up to Laguna Beach, and you're going to walk out on the beach, and you're going to sit there and put your feet in the sand, and you can visualize all of those. You have an unlimited GPS device to anything that you can imagine, and provided you're able to articulate your current coordinates and you don't allow the limitations of the illusion of your own deficiencies to inhibit you, you can understand the limitless power of your imagination to guide you and protect you in life. And absent the voice of contextualizing reality in a way that eliminates all forms of discernment by using your past as a predictive tool for anticipating failure, disappointment, betrayal, and pain, you can actually just experience what's happening in front of you with no prejudice. And where the emotional framework of your experience becomes a profound version of empathy, which is not actionable, but merely informative of the true nature of the people standing in front of you. Where the emptiness of a narcissist falls short of authentic. And when somebody tells you, I love you, you'll know when they're telling the truth. Where acknowledgement for who you are at the very essence becomes somebody's passport to enjoying the company of somebody who would dare to use your mind to create something in the essence of love and concern for their well-being. And this experience is available to every man, woman, and child, absent a personality disorder, which has arrested their development in a state of perpetual infancy. That if you wanted to know what the Buddha was talking about, or you wanted to know what the kingdom of God really meant, or heaven versus hell, heaven was merely part of the continuum of human experience. Being a person absent fear versus a person dominated by fear and suffering. That would be hell. And the reason they contextualize other humans as demonic was because they did not have a DSM-5 to say that that is a covert narcissist. But what they recognized about these individuals is they did not have the capacity to create ideations from nothing in servitude of the well-being of other people, and they would merely be transactional, that they did not have the capacity for that. And so the people like narcissists exist only as the voice of rumination, a perpetual need to recontextualize reality as to protect themselves from any assertions of culpability, liability, any devaluation, because they have an internal emotional environment that cannot generate emotional experiences other than psychopathy or narcissistic injury. And so they have to create a false self. And because they had already developed this way of existing prior to the period of time in which other children would go on to develop the normal structures of personality, which we are talking about now, they don't have those. They only exist as a bundle of emulated behaviors with emotional impermanence, needing the emotional responses of other people to grant themselves being, because they need to have that to generate their own emotions. And those emotions that they generate then will correlate to their cognitions and an experience of self. And so narcissists are people, due to emotional impermanence and internal trauma, perpetually require the emotional engagement and reactivity of other people as to generate their own sense of being. And because they don't have the other emotions developed, they don't have the capacity to interpret the authentic behaviors of others, merely left to project. They lack the capacity for empathy merely because their emotional development did not continue past the original moments of trauma. And so they don't have maternal or paternal instincts. They don't have communal emotions. They can only experience other people through their own experiences that they gain from those people. So you're idealizing them, they feel good about themselves. That is how they experience you. Your emotions change, they become very upset because they cannot maintain themselves without the constant acknowledgement for the existence of the false self that they try to manage to maintain. And it is a real person, it is a real experience, and it is a valid one. And it is very similar to the nature of more developed personalities. It just doesn't have the automatic permanence. It doesn't have the reactivity. It doesn't have the trigger as the mechanical mechanism through the stimulus of the behavioral responses of perpetual perfectionism that would attempt to address the externalized threat of one's own deficiencies. That you react to yourself, that your threat in your life is you. You are what triggers you because you see yourself in the facial expressions, the devaluing comments, or the praise of others. And you merely seek positive affect. You merely seek your happiness, the very happiness you displaced when you told yourself you were broken and not good enough, in response to something that a child would not have the capacity to actually understand. But there is a cause for this type of psychological mechanism, given the profound complexities of the developing brain. It would necessitate a motivational psychological instrument to continue to develop and develop and develop. It's just that we have not recognized that there is a time when you're supposed to exit adolescence. You're supposed to exit childhood from an emotional standpoint. You're supposed to be able to operate with discernment and wisdom. That everything you've learned on your journey should guide you to be capable of prosperity, to guide you to be capable of communicating and understanding other people. Yet we live in a world of profound disconnect, profound lack of understanding and communication. That we are led to believe that the role relegated to you in any relationship is the happiness of someone else, their needs. Needs, 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 needs. And where do these needs originate? These needs originate in a perpetual requirement for validation for your sufficiency. You're good enough. And now relationship is an agreement between two people as to help each other meet their needs, meet their goals socially and otherwise and emotionally, and help me overcome my perpetual fear of abandonment and help me feel like I'm good enough and lovable. And there is a reason why there's a lack of fulfillment and divorcing, because it's nearly impossible to help somebody achieve fulfillment by trying to assist them in their happiness. And in particular, if you were to apply that to a narcissist, you will find the futility of that. That your very kindness and love is something that is also going to go unnoticed because it can never be noticed by somebody who themselves doesn't possess those capacities. Second, a person who requires perpetual victimhood in order to curtail the experiences of their own inferiority is going to need to transform you into a villain and survive by subordinating you and indoctrinating you into a pattern of reactive abuse that would then be reminiscent of their childhood. That narcissists experience love through the acknowledgement of their suffering. And it's an inescapable phenomenon for most of these individuals. And I will say, in my short time in dealing with people, I've encountered a few covert narcissists And I will say that there are some other things that I've discovered that give me at least hope for access in terms of seeing how I might be able to mitigate some of their experiences as well. But it depends, because most of them that contact me are merely trying to use me for the same needs that they always are projecting: understanding, validation for their suffering, recognition for their experiences in a way that helps them bifurcate themselves from the acknowledgement of their own culpability and responsibility in the perpetuation of their own brokenness. And it's, sad in a way. However, it's also illusory. And so when I deal with people, I don't deal with them with any measure of significance around their emotional experiences, mainly because I know that those experiences are literally just recreated. And the only difference between me and you or anybody I talk to is that I'm aware of it, and you will become aware of it in our conversation to a degree where I would nearly say it's 100%. That I have not encountered a single person in a coaching call that did not get everything that I had to offer them, because it's that easy. That when you take somebody out of needing to try to understand themselves and you put them into the emotional experiences of their memories, they don't have to search for those memories. They just pop up. They just appear. That we don't have to dig for 5-year-old or 7-year-old or what happened. Because what ends up happening is, as you start going through your memories, looking at not good enough, looking at broken, when you start, your mind is now looking at that commonality and connecting the dots. It is the most enlightening process, because for the first time, you go, wow, holy, wait. So this discard experience, this trauma bond, this whatever it is, it's just a perpetuation of the same thing I do at work, the same thing I did in school. It's like people are blown away at the discovery of this. They're like, holy moly, I'm talking to somebody who's getting a PhD. She's studying cultural anthropology. Why? Because she's trying to get answers for the way her father was, because she still blames him in a way that she thinks that if he wasn't so angry and rage-filled, that she thinks the rage that he exhibited has some relevance in terms of her ethnicity within her society, that she's studying the treatment of her ethnicity within the United Kingdom as a way to try to explain her own development. That she's a perfect student about to get a PhD because she is going to try to fix society so that other little girls don't go through life feeling the way she does. And when she sees this and it disappears, the constraints, when the brokenness is gone, when the voice in your head completely goes silent and you're just sitting with me and we're just being there, and it's like saying hello to somebody for the first time. And now you understand what I'm talking about. Now you got it. And that's all I'm going to do, is I'm going to stand and stand and stand, because I know I'm not talking to you. The feelings you have, the thoughts. When I'm talking, the doubt, the need to understand. It's very fascinating, because when I give somebody the statements that literally sever them from that experience, I give up the right to have the complaint that I'm broken in my life forever. I give up the right to have the complaint that I'm not good enough. This isn't an affirmation. It's the utilization of the same dimensions of the mind that put into existence the I'm not good enough to begin with. And you will notice you have two voices in one moment. The voice coming from what we would typically call your subconscious, but it's, in my view, more of a supraconscious, because what you discover is that the profound power of your conscious mind has been observing this whole thing with a level of awareness that will seem supernatural when you discover it. That in many ways I view the human being as this experiential supercomputer that's playing Super Mario's. That how much of your brain power do you need to be a people pleaser? How much brain power do you use asking yourself for the 1 millionth time, what's wrong with me? Trying to figure out how to be good enough at work. You know, that these thoughts that you think are intelligent are just repetitive and involuntary, and you only have an illusion of being the author of those thoughts. Those thoughts just keep happening, and you are the only person listening to them. That as an experience of self, that is all you are. You think that the voice in your head is you. But see, it isn't. You just listen to it. And it is literally just something that creates a contextualization. It is actually between you and your conscious mind, that it is an interpreter for the reality outside of yourself. It arrests your discernment. It pushes pause on the acquisition of reality as to reframe it, as to make it consistent with somebody experiencing themselves as not good enough. And when it shuts off, then that doesn't happen. And then there is no good enough or not good enough. There's just existing. And so in a very real sense, it merely causes the restoration of a way of existing that predates the genesis of identity, that what children have is what you'll have, except you'll have all of your knowledge. It's sort of like when you think like, well, if I knew what I knew now and I went back and it's just like that, yeah. Except now all of your experiences become part of the working model of navigating reality. Or if you're always wondering, why do I know all of these things, yet I can't seem to use them? It's because none of those things address what's actually causing you to experience something. You know, the Bible talked about the Tower of Babel. And that would represent somebody eating from the tree of knowledge, trying to understand themselves, perfect themselves, trying to reach something. And that's why they say all will fall short of the glory of God. Well, what does that mean? It means that all the aspirations of your thought process and mind and effort to fix yourself will never, ever, ever compare to what's possible for you absent that process. That the God that Jesus spoke about was merely the experiential realm of possibility, the encountering of everything and nothing. And so when he says, I am the Son of God, he's referencing having created himself. But he doesn't take credit for the creation, because the ironic experience of that type of genesis of self is that it occurs absent your identity. Meaning, it isn't the self that's trying to fix itself that would then assert some notion of grandiosity, but merely encountering this infinite domain of possibility, possible ways of being. That in the world of being, human beings can create any way to be in any moment, and without cause or reason, free of the circumstances of life, where your happiness, your joy, is merely something that you can create and be now. And the only reason you couldn't do that now is because you have not yet displaced the ways of being that exist currently. That you can tell someone you need to love yourself first. But when you're talking to that individual, you're talking to someone who experiences themselves as broken, not good enough, flawed, deficient. And so in that experience of self, there is no space to create anything. That person experiences a need to fix themselves, change their circumstances, overcome something, get a promotion, fix their finances, pay their bills, get this to happen, that to happen. And when they do, then we can talk about it. But I'm not good enough right now. And that's the truth, that we have solved the riddle of the mind. And it is so simple yet so illusory, that an effort to attempt to understand what I'm sharing would never compare to the extraordinary nature of experiencing it for yourself in the same way that I have, in the same way that people I talk to do. And it is something that I can say inspires me, is to see somebody get it, to see somebody wake up and just be there in the moment with nowhere to go, nothing to do, and there's nothing wrong. And they see that anything is possible and that they could be any way they want. And now they have what's called free will. And in that domain of experience, the people that have achieved these states attempted to embody rules. The morality of Christianity in the context of sin was not meant to be God's preferences for how you were to behave, but merely a practical rule book for the maintenance of the born-again experience, that anything within the model of sin merely appealed to your identity. That if you made it about yourself, if you needed to be special or better than people, if you did things consistent with those things that they called sin, it would appeal to your identity in a way, be a ticket to hell. You're suffering. That it wasn't a preference that you didn't have sex, or it wasn't a preference. It was just that you wouldn't have the experience you'll need. That if you weren't suffering, you wouldn't need to do things to try to be happy. And so when you make it about yourself, when you operate with greed, when you beguile or manipulate, these things cater to the lower dimensions of your experience and would imperil you back into the trap of the vicious circle, the hell. You see, when they said that God created the devil and hell, that's what they were talking about, the voice in your head. That when you said, I'm not good enough, you created not just the experience of a entity that wasn't good enough, but the world that you were not good enough within, an inescapable realm of experience. And why did they call those other people demonic? Was because that's all they existed as. And the only thing they could do is talk to you, talk to the voice, make you special, make you good enough, try to validate all the things that you think you needed to become in order to fix your feelings. And that's how they would get control. And that's it. And so that's why you would see the little depictions of the character of an angel and a demon on your shoulder. Because the version of you that creates from nothing, when I say creates from nothing, what I mean is the spontaneous ideations of goodness, meaning like you think about somebody you care about and you think of ways to make them happy. Like I would think about cooking for my girlfriend, and that would inspire me. I would feel it. And the feeling I got might be what they said the Holy Spirit might feel like, because I could get a little tingling, like, ooh, this will make her happy. And then I would go shopping, and I would be thinking about it. Like, I would imagine the Food Network and like a little food fight in the kitchen, and I would want to make her happy. And then I would try it, and then it didn't work. And it was as if those dimensions of me were denied until they no longer existed, until I was left to just try to figure it out as a robot, just sleepwalking. And that was her intention. That everything that made me good and kind, everything I ever thought about to the betterment of others, and some of these things were profound things I did, like, making a highlight reel for my best friend and roommate, and flying to North Carolina and walking into all the NASCAR executive offices and presenting him until we secured an opportunity for him to race on television. And then what did he do? He betrayed me. The same week that we came back to California, he threw me out on the street. He kept money he owed. My car was repossessed. I couldn't finish attending Chapman University. And he had my Mustang that was sitting at his race car shop dismantled and put on the streets of Whittier, and it got impounded. And he came to my house and he took all the stereo equipment I had to remove from my Subaru so he could use it. And so the person I was to be in life was always denied. And I would always try and try. And I was always forgiving. I just didn't understand. I would project myself onto people. I would be mirrored. I would think that everyone was like me, that I understood myself, and I would try to help other people. I would try to understand them. I would think that they feared failure, that they thought they were not good enough, and I could teach them. And I could show them I could go out in the world and do things for people. I could help their careers. I could make them money. I could help them figure out their businesses. I can do things, and I could never do them for myself. For myself was broken. Myself was not good enough. And so I had these abilities, but I could only apply it to others. But those are the dimensions of you that get denied, that get rejected, that die. And that would be hell. And they would be the demons. People absent those attributes. People incapable of thinking about you in that way, unless they can see clearly what's in it for them, and what's in it for them would obviously have to be in excess of whatever it was that they would perceive themselves as sacrificing. And because they can't see themselves doing that, they could never interpret your intentions as being anything short of manipulative or beguiling. And they would need to be a victim to you, because your interference would trample and tamper with their genesis of their own reality. That the things that I could do for my friend would exceed anything he could do for himself. And so he'd be jealous and envious. That he couldn't represent himself the way I could. He couldn't believe in himself the way I could. Most certainly wasn't going to believe in me. So he'd have to deny that I was that type of person. It took this particular friend 7 years to even be able to talk to me and acknowledge that. But that was the universal experience of my life. It's what broke me in February. Trying to take people on a journey, idealizing them into my future, And I'm so glad. I'm so glad they broke me. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for breaking me. But this is what I've learned. Sure beats superchargers. And that's what there is. That I look at psychology and I say, it's a profound and already existent structure of people that want to make a difference for others. And they're very close, but very far. That just understanding and drawing these correlations between the past and the present has no power. That you have to be able to be in the experience and you have to be able to make that profound connection between your current sufferings. And you have to understand that many of these things that you call feelings, like I feel not good enough, I feel broken, I feel like this, feel like that, those aren't feelings. Those are ways of being. Those are who you actually believe yourself to be, that you're trying to fix. You think that you're needing to improve. You thinking that you're not quite there yet. But it isn't about becoming good enough. That good enough and not good enough, neither which are valid or authentic. That you'll never become happy by being good enough. Because you'd be stimulated by dissatisfaction and unhappiness on the pursuit to the temporary pat on the back. But you see, when you find your peace and your freedom, you don't even need to be happy. That there's no such thing. Like, what happens for me is that there is no emotion that is more valid than any other. That sad is just as valid as happy, and it's not negative, it's informative. That it's powerful. That I can feel sad if someone acts a certain way. That's great. That my empathy is profound because it's informing of the nature of someone else's experience and nothing more. That I can be free, that I can pick my battles in the sense that, like, I can go out and watch the football game tonight and it doesn't matter who's next to me and who's talking. I don't need to fix or change people. And I don't need their validation either. That I can go the rest of my life and never get married and I won't feel like I missed something. I found myself. That I'm not incomplete. That I'm whole, complete, and perfect the way I am. I don't need to be perfect. The perfection of the existence of a person is so unfathomable that my existence is, incalculably, immensely generous of whatever created all of this. That for me to exist, that's one sperm, one egg, trillions of cell divisions that went nearly perfect. My dad as much as farted before whatever they did and wherever they did it, the back of the Cadillac, I don't know, I wouldn't be here. And that would hold true for all of my grandparents and everybody going back to whatever we came from. It had all had to go perfect. A butterfly flapped its wings one extra time 10,000 years ago. None of us are here. Whether you believe in a Big Bang or a God or whatever, it doesn't matter. The probability of your existence is incalculably low. And as far as we know, this is your life. This is it. And you're living as if this isn't it, as if it's coming, as if someday you're going to get something. Someday, it's going to turn out. It doesn't. There's no someday. There isn't even a past or a future in a way. That this is it. You and me right now, right here. And you're either going to be here, or you're going to be in here, or you're going to be wherever you go in your little mind. But the truth is that the human condition has its solutions. And that's just a fact. And there isn't anything more direct, more pure, or more true than the ontology of being. That psychology is just describing it. That's it. And the whole psychology of the human experience can be flushed down a toilet in one conversation. No matter what you suffered, no matter how permanent you think it is, no matter what you think you've been through, no matter how ingrained you actually believe these patterns and experiences to be, the truth is that none of that's true. That your current being gives your current experience. That's all. And you've just been being this way for a long time. And you have a lot of memories, but it's the only way of being that you know. And it's adjustable, perfect, has many different forms, many different interpretations based on whatever environments you find yourself within. And so you're limited to merely adjusting yourself based on the perception of current necessity. And that is such a profound constraint that you're living in a tiny box. Currently, you are merely a hamster on a wheel. And that's the good news. That as rich as your life has been with experience, even the most free moments that you've ever encountered, and the measure of control you believe you have currently can never compare to what's possible. And what's possible isn't merely anything's possible. It's not a theoretical assertion. It is an acknowledgement of the limitlessness of the human experience of being. That a human being is an immense power, like it's an indescribable phenomenon. That the mind is so unlimited. That I'm not talking as a special person or some genius. No, I'm only speaking as somebody who just experiences my own beingness, nothing more. And that anybody and everybody can experience that. That we may have our unique expressions of it, where there's physical things, perhaps with me or my brain, or things that would distinguishing me in some manner, but human beings have the capacity to exist nearly entirely bifurcated from their past. Where I cannot explain myself today based on my past. Because the person I get to be would be an improbability. No. You couldn't explain me as an American or a man or someone from California. That I'm not a product of my education or my aggregate knowledge. No. Not at all. And so part of the reason why, I would invite people to never look at anything I say and make any assertions about the implications of me is because that would deny me what it is that I'm talking for. Because I would shut the fuck up if that's all I thought people got. Because I don't need it. Because I don't give two shits about what you think about me at all. I'm only talking because of what you think about you. I'm done. Cooked. So, in that context, I experience merely existing more aligned with a purpose, that I literally said, like, I looked in the mirror. These exercises that I tell people to do when I'm live streaming, like, give up the right to have the complaint that you're not good enough in your life forever, like, say that out loud. Like, that's what I did. It's an exercise one of my mentors gave to me. That simple statement I used to disappear the experience of being unwanted when I was 24. That thought of being unwanted was something that imperiled my capacity to talk to women. And my life transformed by saying that one time. That being unwanted disappeared. And so I just had freedom. I didn't fear rejection and I could just talk, and it was like a big deal. The interesting thing is that you would imagine being somebody that could not talk to women before and now could, would rejoice. Would be like, yes, I figured it out. No, because it no longer had significance either. That being unwanted would compel me to want to be wanted, and that getting wanted was like, whoa. Well, no. So there's no reward for wantedness because it disappears the constraint, it disappears the associated suffering. And so I'm not trying to escape the experience of fearing abandonment or being good enough or adequate in the interpretation of a woman. So what does that do? Is it enables me to talk to them. I just could have, like, I could go up and introduce myself. And I had no big deal anymore. You know, so to go from a bumbling idiot trying to figure out and strategize how to talk to a woman to just being able to introduce myself and have it be simple, and then let them neg me, let them reject, and it would be funny. I'd just laugh, and make a joke out of it, and then they would want to talk to me. So what's really cool is, in the context of coaching or talking to people, I don't talk as a guy or a man or some particular perspective. It's not, there's no distinction, that, like, whether I'm talking to a man or woman in this capacity, it makes no difference. The conversation gets no adjustment, no alteration, no deviation. It doesn't even matter what they think that their problems are. The people will call me thinking that I'm going to give them advice or help them through something. No. It's kind of like, I can see why they would say, well, I'm teaching you how to fish, not giving you fish. Because your mind is not any different than mine. That absent the constraints or concerns about yourself, your brokenness, what's wrong with you, then you just have clarity. In fact, the significance surrounding all of your challenges would just disappear, meaning that whatever it is you're dealing with that's troubling and triggering and upsetting to you would stop having those meanings associated with it. You wouldn't feel broken and not good enough because of your circumstances. And so you just look at it and it'd be paperwork or, just something to do. Oh, you got a court date, and you just go and show up and you just tell the truth and then you move on. And so, it makes things really clear. And that's it. And so, what would your life look like absent all the meaning? Absent the meaning being, you know, the significance, particularly the significance as it pertains to your experience of you. That if this over here doesn't mean you're broken anymore, if this over here didn't mean you're not good enough, if this over here didn't mean you're unwanted, if this over here doesn't mean those things, when somebody coming into your space trying to shame and devalue you just looks like somebody trying to shame and devalue you, and it doesn't cause you to react emotionally, then you're just observing somebody that's just displaying a dissociation from reality. That they're projecting things towards you that just don't adhere to the reality of what you're doing or who you're being. So it doesn't necessitate guilt or shame or correction. You could be responsible. You could listen for what's true about what they're saying. That they could be upset with you and maybe you didn't do something or you did do something. And you could address the something without having to address yourself. So it's like, Nate, you spilled the milk over there. I'll be like, oh my gosh, I did spill the milk over there. Listen, I'm really sorry for spilling the milk and upsetting you. Yeah, I hear you. You're very upset with me. I can see why. Let me go over there and clean up the milk. Anything else? No, thank you. Perfect, thank you. Great. Or, you know what? I actually didn't spill the milk over there. What does it mean that I spilled the milk? I spilled the milk. There's no meaning. So you can fail without being a failure. Making mistakes doesn't mean anything. But look at how much the meaning impacts you. Look at how your fear of disappointment, your fear of failure imperils you. Like, you think you're supposed to be perfect. You think that in the pursuit of things that matter to you in life, that the only way for you to make it is to ahead of time know exactly what to do. And if you don't know that, you're too afraid because you might make a mistake, or you're afraid you might try and then really discover you're broken and not good enough. Oh no. And so you'll rather just honor that you're broken and not good enough and just be resigned rather than impacted by the disappointment of failing in the pursuit of what you want. And so you'll rest comfortable in your stuckness and suffering in avoidance of just a bigger reaction, only to discover that after 10 years of looking back, you'll realize you sold out. That the very things that you were avoiding are what you ended up with. Yeah, if you're afraid of failure and so you don't want to step to the plate, then you'll never hit the home run. You'll lose by default, by forfeiture. But what is winning and losing anyway? That if you took a gander at modern life, you would see that it's the Lord of the Flies out here. That everything that has been giving you identity, your participation in this game, well, we're starting to see some cracks in the system. That perhaps, you know, it's not as significant and meaningful. And who you are, what you are, your value is something you can't find on a piece of paper. That perhaps your investment in the thoughts and feelings of other people was a bankrupt investment. that it's not about not caring. I care profoundly. I care more than I've ever cared. I just don't identify myself based on the thoughts, the opinions, or the feelings of people, particularly in a world where people don't know themselves at all. That there isn't a person qualified in this world to tell me who or what I am more than the one person who's lived every moment of my existence. And that person would be me. So, what validity is there in what they think of you? The only time what they think impacts you is when what they say they think aligns with what you think already. That the only person who's ever had any power over you has been you. And that has always been the case. And the ultimate threshold of personal responsibility and accountability would be the acknowledgement of the architecture of your own experience of yourself and the acknowledgement of yourself as the architect. That you said all of those things about you. You said that I'm not good enough. You said that I'm broken. You said that there's something wrong with me. You said you don't know. You said that you're confused. You said that you can't. You said that you're small, broken, helpless, abandoned, broken, stupid, angry. And if you could say that, and have that be the entire basis of the world as you know it, well, maybe it's time to consider saying something else. But before you say that, there's a few things to let go of. So that's kind of like, which pill do you want to take? Red pill, blue pill? So that's it. The ontology versus psychology. That psychology has profound power and implications if the lens of psychology can be expanded to incorporate the true origins of the human experience. And without that, it's impotent. That we can just keep writing books and doing studies and hand it off to the next generation. That we can continue to have no answers. We can just have people standing in line at pharmacies or spending tens of thousands of dollars to talk to somebody who needed a PhD to merely listen for an hour and a desk reference to remind them of the majority of the shit they forgot when they were pulling all-nighters to be graded on their capacity to reproduce the thoughts and ideas pertaining to the human mind and experience that they themselves are not the author of. And yet, we all retain this capacity, that there's many people dedicated towards addressing the human experience, the human condition, the psychology of. And there's just some additional tools that we can add to the toolbox to turn the 10 years of talk therapy into perhaps 1 or 2 appointments to address how we educate children. That maybe perhaps one day we can look back at this time and say, this was the age of the pill. This was the age of the mental health disorder. This was the age of the DSM-5. An age predicted by the wisdom of something as simple as the tree of knowledge, and why somebody 2,000 years ago would create such a profound metaphor that could most certainly articulate the conditions of life in 2023. That the human aspirations to fix oneself, to fix each other, to fix life, that everything we do to imbue ourselves with identity is merely just contextualizing ourselves, stigmatizing ourselves, imperiling ourselves, and building ourselves a prison of language. That the catastrophe of human suffering was invented the moment we created spoken word. And for the very first time, the human being had the ability to describe themselves in language during moments of challenge and failure in childhood. And that in doing so, we created the caricature of ourselves that resides as a stimulant for the world within our imagination that we use to picture tomorrow, and the basis for all of our ideas and thoughts, constrained and limited within the boundaries of profound emotionality. As we continue to embark on the meaningless journey of chasing the happiness that we forfeited the very first time we thought there was something wrong with us, that we thought we were broken, that we thought we were not good enough. I think, therefore I am. That who you are is merely what you said you are. But the truth is, you're much more than that. You're quite limitless. Yay! But you see, the thing is that this isn't a problem. There isn't no way to avoid it. You see, this isn't a childhood development challenge. This isn't about what's wrong with people. You know, what I'm sharing isn't fixable. It's not avoidable. As long as human beings have language, this is going to be exactly how they develop personalities, that there's nothing about childhood that you could change to prevent it. Nothing. There's nothing you could do about it. There's nothing we need to do about it. That every single human being is going to experience the moment in which the beingness of a child encounters the failure it is impossible to avoid. That you can create the most perfect environment, it wouldn't matter. Now, I mean, it has a profound difference in terms of the way that people patternize. You see, like, if you develop a personality in an environment of narcissists, well, you end up more of a people pleaser because your behavioral strategies have everything to do with surviving your parents. Whereas someone else in a healthy environment will develop the same thoughts, not good enough, broken, but in relationship to external variables like schoolwork. Like they got a B instead of an A and their dad got mad. And so it has a profound implication in terms of the viability of the behavior patterns. That some people are more effective because they're not good enough and their need to be perfect is not in relationship to devaluing parents, but more in relationship to things outside of themselves, and so they can perform better. But it doesn't make much of a difference in terms of the fulfillment of an individual because it's still an inescapable phenomenon of experience. And so, optimizing childhood would really just optimize the personality structures that people develop, and they would still have the same experiential challenge that every single man, woman, and child in some level is going to be incomplete with their parents as a result of these experiential psychological dynamics. It's an inescapable aspect of human development that the psychology of identity is based upon an experiential shortcoming. It's the motivational instrument for the continuation of perpetual behavior. It has to be that way, otherwise people would not aspire. They need to have the cattle prod of pain or fear. It's just necessary for all animals. That you couldn't take it away from animals. You couldn't take suffering and pain or fear away because then they wouldn't have any catalyst for surviving. That the emotionality of people is meant to be a behavioral stimulant. Happiness is just nothing but the illusory reward of behaviors that would evolutionarily be consistent with survival or reproduction viability. That's it. And so, people often ask, well, if there was a God, why would there be suffering? Well, not to be religious on you, but you could not develop a human being without suffering. You couldn't do it. You wouldn't have a human being. You'd have a psychopath. Because if a child was born absent the capacity to experience pain or fear or sadness, imagine child-proofing your house. What happens when the 3-year-old gets a hold of a kitchen knife, steak knife, and then you go in there and they're carving on their leg, standing on the counter? Don't jump, Nate. I could break my legs. And I wouldn't feel it. I wouldn't fear it. No, I can't suffer. Well, then what happens when you put me in school? I would have been the golden child, a human being without suffering. Can you imagine how perfectly blissful that would be? No. Because my brain and mind would never be able to experience the suffering of others. I would be sticking somebody with the pencil in school, listening to him make noise that I couldn't understand. It would be entertaining, like pushing a Teddy Ruxpin. I'd be sticking someone with the pencil and they're going, ah, ah, ah. And I couldn't myself feel that, so I wouldn't know why they're doing it. It would just seem funny. You'd have to talk to me and say, Nathan, don't you understand you're hurting them? No, Mommy. Well, if you don't stop, we're going to take away your remote control car. Oh, okay, I'll stop. And then 30 years later, you're wondering why there's bodies popping up in the neighborhood. So you go, how'd the gigolo, kill her and do that? because he was born absent various emotional experiences. He's missing elements of human being. That many dimensions of human experience can be whittled down to single words: sad, happy, love, salt, salty, sugar, sweet, red, blue. If you were colorblind, I could write a poem about the majesty of a rainbow. It would not mean anything to you. There would be no way for me to create that experience for you. If you did not have taste buds, then me telling you I finished dinner with warm apple pie and ice cream would not mean anything. I can give it to you and it wouldn't mean anything. You can love a narcissist, it won't mean anything. They can't experience things, then they can't relate to it. It doesn't exist. Red doesn't exist for the colorblind. Sad or pain or love or joy, if it doesn't exist for a person, if their mind does not have the capacity to generate those experiences, then it doesn't exist at all in their world. It doesn't exist within other people. That they are blind to the experiences of others. If elements of their own experience are missing, they can't account for those because their mind will not be able to recreate those experiences in their genesis of an interpreted view of other people. It would have no meaning. And so if you created human beings without the capacity to suffer, then there wouldn't be any boundaries or guardrails. That people wouldn't even be saddened by the destruction of others. That we would just be doing whatever we do to one another. We probably wouldn't even create laws. Like, we wouldn't feel right or wrong about hurting somebody if it didn't hurt. Like certain insects, you wonder, like a bee that will sting another animal and die. Well, it's part of a greater organism. It doesn't have an occurrence of that. It doesn't worry about it, doesn't think about it. It just does what it's supposed to do. That spiders, male spiders, will often, get eaten alive after trying to reproduce. That their body could be used to feed the young. The female could eat them. There's some insects that when they exit the larval stage, like the males, they don't even get to eat. That they only have a certain amount of energy, they reproduce, and they're gone within a couple days. Just like that. And so any dimension of the human experience, if you took it away, you wouldn't have a human being anymore. And so if you were to be God and creating a perfect being or human being, well, it would have to be everything that we already have. In a sense, we're the only people responsible for our own suffering individually and that of other people. And that's it. We're just the children making a mess of our little bedroom here. And that's that. And so the perfect God couldn't create a human being without suffering. Suffering would not allow evolution. Like if you took suffering away from animals and people, then they would have no emotionality for survival. If they didn't have fear, they wouldn't avoid predation. If a rabbit has no fear and it runs out in the open, an owl just picks it up, it's gone, just like that. A gazelle doesn't run from the lion. If animals couldn't be hungry and get pained by hunger, they wouldn't have the motive to eat. If you took away the sex drive of animals or the pleasure or any of that things, then the behavior goes away. It just, if I crop dusted a drug over Africa that eliminated hunger, then within a very short period of time, all the animals would perish like that. If they didn't have fear, if they didn't have any of those things, you couldn't take away any dimension of the perfection of the system and have it persist. And so to me, fulfillment, enlightenment, whatever's possible for a person is not promised. If people want to live on an illusion that their life's going to turn out, they're going to figure it out one day, that they're going to be happy, they won't. That's not going to happen. If you want to be, grandiose and pretend that, there is some greater meaning or purpose for you to discover, I regretfully inform you that there isn't. And that there's many people that would try to create that as merely a means to contest the profound resignation that comes along with being a normal person imperiled within the perpetual repetitive paradigms of one's own suffering experiences rooted in the mind of a child. And you can just get hit by a car anyway. That there isn't always going to be some meaning or purpose about things that happen. That we can't take the Holocaust and say that this is a good thing that we had this experience. Because the truth of the matter is that without real, perceptual alterations in terms of the manner in which modern human beings participate in life, that if we don't start to address the challenges of leadership, meaning we can't keep putting sociopaths and narcissists in office, that the collective of humanity is merely held hostage by the sociopaths and narcissists. That I've never had a problem with someone in Russia or China or Afghanistan, and I would never elect to adopt any of those ideologies or ways of choosing to prejudice my experience of another, because I would be inspired by the opportunity to bridge any divide with any person, because the only thing that they're going to see when I sit there is another person, indistinct from them, that there wouldn't be a prejudice that they could apply in my direction that would ever characterize me, because I have surrendered any semblance of an adopted identity. Not a man, not an American, not a dude, not an alpha, not a nothing. That I will take my freedom to be, I will take my discernment, I will grant everybody the freedom to be exactly how they are, and I'll always make that valid. Because I'm aware that any manner in which I choose to differentiate and distinguish myself is what would create my lack of capacity in understanding or connecting with or recognizing or empathizing with other people. And given that I want to make a difference with my life, it mandates that I never distinguish myself in any way, on any basis, or even assert that anything about me or my past has anything to do with who I'm being now. Or the same with you, that I don't care what you believe, I don't care what your gender is, I don't care where you were born, I don't care what you think. I just care who you're being. And that my experience is not unlike anybody else's. That there is no difference. That the profoundness of being a person and being a human being transcends gender or any of those factors, that there isn't anything about being that has anything to do with any of that. And so there isn't anything that a person could have experienced that would be beyond the boundaries of that which I could hear. Not whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, valid or invalid. That somebody just sharing their experience would just be them sharing their experience, and I could listen to it and hear it, and I can get that that's their experience, and that's all there is to do. And if I could do that with anybody, and I could recognize the validity of an individual's perspective, regardless of how they came to experience that, then I would have the ability to communicate with them. And it occurs to me that that would solve a lot of problems. And so I will not allow anybody to tell me who or what I am. Or they can tell me whatever they want. So I wouldn't stop them, but I'm not going to define myself in any way that would engender a boundary in my capacity to make a difference for people. That given that is who I said I am, that is who I said I am, that is who I created myself to be, that is what I put in place of not good enough or broken. I said, how about make a difference? That's all. Simple. And so that's just what I see. That's what would compel me. That is what would cause me to make a video. That is what wakes me up. That is what has me think. That is where I contextualize from. That is what I think about when I plan. That is what I weigh. And so that is what creates the foundation of the ideations. And so knowing that and understanding the power of being, then I can choose wisely. And so that's why I would want to go to school, is because I think, just coaching people, it's too small. Doesn't matter how profound of a difference I can make for one person. Well, I'm well aware of that. But what could I do if I could write? What could I do if we can take this and put it into the psychology lectures of the universities? What if it can be an updated talk therapy? That's what I see. That rather than having these types of teachings be obscured or be spiritual or be something that exists outside the boundaries of psychology, it's like, well, no. Why would that sound silly? Well, we're talking about the human mind, right? The human psyche. So let's take a look at that. This is psychology, is it not? And somebody tells me they had a spiritual awakening, I know what they're talking about. But I would say, yeah, that's what it's like when the voice in your head shuts up. Yeah. So we're all talking about the same thing anyway. So it's not, it's the terminology is less important to me. God, consciousness, whatever you want it to be, I don't care. You guys, everyone can go and figure that shit out, For me, it's more important that it makes a difference, and so it's kind of like, rather than going down the bunny hole of spirituality and, things like that, the metaphysics of it, the universe, God, and, it's like, well, there's a time for that. It's not right now for me, because that would be an impediment to the normalization of something that I think is normal, that I think ultimately that human beings were meant to simply be able to, you know, live life absent the afflictions of a scared child. That grown human beings don't need to live their lives fearing abandonment or repeating patterns that are nonsensical. You know, it's not necessary. Now, is it necessary that everybody, experiences that? No. But it would be helpful that enough people do to where we can start to have, a renewed sense of social accountability and responsibility, and not from the context of punishing and shaming and, fixing what's broken, but in just having adults. I don't see adults. And what I mean by that is I don't like listening to people lie anymore. I'm tired of recognizing the profound intellectual and emotional limitations of leadership. If your mind does not have enough capacity, if you're not authentic enough, if you cannot go to the negotiating table on a global scale with the commitment of peace in mind, if your thought process isn't trained around that which makes a difference for others, if that isn't the basis of your participation in leadership, well, then you're not a leader of mine. That's all. That I don't really care, to hear any more, expansive explanations for why it might be okay to bomb a hospital, or, the 100-year history and how that could, explain what's happening. Like, I'm not going to need to read the manifesto of a school shooter, to try to figure out if it makes sense. That it doesn't make sense. That it's an invalid pursuit. But I'm just interested in that which makes a difference. That, I'm not going to spend my life, whining and complaining about the problems of the world, because that would just be being the violinist on the Titanic. Because I'm not resigned about my own potential to make a difference. I'm not afraid of failing at that. It would be well worth it. So I just recognize that, people that embody purpose, people that give their lives to things, are the people that really live. That if I was to play a game with my life, I think that I would not have it be the game of fixing what's broken with myself, the game of proving myself. That I'm not interested in that. That there's just this big playground, of possibility, that there's just this whole world of people that have so much to offer and so much potential that's just so close but so far, that we've, in a way, already solved the riddle of human suffering. And that there's no need for the perpetuation of ongoing ignorance. But rather than, point fingers, complain, or be conspiratorial about what's taking place, well, I can see the conspiracy, and I can see why. I can just see that if you have, a race of people that walk around through life recreating the fear and the brokenness of a confused 5-year-old, well, this is what it can look like. And when the gifts of all their intelligence is, used in the pursuit of those types of aspirations, well, this is what you get. And so in knowing that there's something that can be done about it, well, we just do that. Yeah, and that's that. And that's pretty much cut and dry. And if there's anything I wanted to do about what's going on in the world, rather than protesting and picketing or complaining or politicizing, I would rather just, be somebody that stands for the freedom of people and their minds, and having them be able to experience, their own opportunity to make a difference in their own lives, and having people discover communication, having people discover authenticity, having people discover freedom, having people be able to experience and express love and affinity for others. Have people experience, peace of mind. Have people realize that there isn't anything that they have to do to become happy, and that if they weren't needing to do that, then they can really consider what they might want to do, what might be fulfilling to them. And if people were doing that, then they wouldn't be doing what they're doing now. So that's what it looks like to me. Yeah, but it's not concerning to me whether people care, because people don't know what they care about. People don't even know who they are. People have no idea what their priorities would look like if they were free. You can't even conceptualize what I'm talking about unless you experience it yourself. And if you saw what I saw, you wouldn't have any resignation, because you would see how easy it is. So that's all. I look at it like, well, yeah, but, in a very real way, what people experience themselves as and the way people experience life is very inauthentic and illusory without even knowing that. Like, most of the things I talk about exist in a domain of you don't know, and you don't know that you don't know. Because if you knew, then you would automatically aspire or, figure it out. So it's not, there's no need to indict humanity in that regard, because it's just, everybody that calls me and I talk to them, they have no idea what I'm talking about. I've not had one person, that has called me after listening to everything I've had to say and had any accurate understanding of what exactly the conversation was going to entail, look like, or result in. That when you're talking about something on an experiential level, it's something you couldn't relate to unless you experienced it. And so even within any effort to try to understand it, it would always fall short. There'd be just no way. I mean, in a way, I remember, giving my niece chocolate for the first time. It was funny because I kept trying to give her chocolate and she wouldn't eat it. I don't want it, Uncle Nate. I don't want it. She would get mad. I don't want it, Uncle Nate. I don't want it. It looks yucky. And it was funny. I thought it was cute. But then when she had the chocolate, well, then she understood why I wanted her to eat it. When she thought she knew what it was, she could look at it even. She didn't know. That happened to me with strawberry shortcake. My mom, she used to pick me up from daycare, and she'd go to this restaurant, Polly's Pies or Coco's. And usually she would bring me fish and chips from Coco's, and I loved fish and chips from Coco's. But she brought me something else. You ever seen a tantrum? I used to be a master at tantrums. Like, I used to have to catch my breath. Like, there would be a quiet before the storm. Like, if I was about to get upset, like, I'd be grasping for air to just, It was like the frustration of not having enough lung volume to just let out, My little brother Anthony, man, when he'd throw one of his little tantrums, he would kick his legs out right from under himself. Like, he would hit a trap door. He would do a little jump in the air right in the kitchen, and his little feet would hit his ass, and he'd just plop. And so my mom, God bless her soul, she had something different this time, and it was messy and red. And I was so upset. I was like, where's my fish and chips? I didn't give her fish and chips. She was like, just eat it. You're going to like it. No, I don't want it. And I was so upset. It was like I was going to stubbornly try it. I don't want this. I don't want it. I want the fish and chips. I want my fish and chips. And I remember the first time I tried it. Oh my God. Whoa. It was strawberry shortcake from Polly's Pies. Oh my God. Fresh strawberries, but then this strawberry glaze, and then this biscuit thing. It was soft, but it had a little saltiness, buttery. And then the whipped cream. It was like real whipped cream, like homemade whipped cream. And it was the best thing I ever ate. And it was so messy because it's like it fell off the seat, It was like she had it in one of those little plastic containers that they give you at the restaurant, like to go. And it's like it fell down and it was all messed up. So it just looked like a mess. But to this day, it's my favorite. I had no idea. Never had strawberries before or whipped cream. So when I had the strawberry shortcake, it was like, wow, thank you, Bobby. I love the strawberry shortcake. And now it would be, I want the strawberry shortcake. No, I don't want the fish and the chips. I want the strawberry shortcake. Which I can go get the strawberry shortcake from Polly's Pies. I'm going to have to go get some tomorrow now that I mention it. But that's what it's like, that many things that, they're experienced, and, you'd have to experience it to understand it. And this conversation is kind of one of those where you can describe the experience, but it's me describing these things that I talk about, particularly things that are ontological or dealing with personal freedom or fear or boundaries or waking up from this or that or letting go of this or that. It's sort of like, well, you could read, Gordon Ramsay's apple pie recipe online. And you could understand the ingredients, But that's a lot different than eating it. A lot different. So understanding these types of things, it's never going to, it's never going to, rise to the level of experiencing them. Experience is out of this world. That a human being could experience nothing and everything at the same time. And a human being in a conversation could be sitting there feeling like a child, where the whole experiential realm of reality that has dominated their entire existence since childhood vanishes, including all significance around all personal circumstance and sufferings, and these big problems that dominate these people look like nothing but circumstance, where your mind can just go, oh, well, I can do this and do this and do this, and we'll just get that taken care of, I guess. Yeah, I've gotten messages from people, where it's like following up. And it's like somebody going through divorce, horrible experience, divorcing a narcissist. And then I hear from them a few months later. It's like, well, after the conversation, it just became paperwork. I became free. Yeah, went and restarted my career. I'm thriving. Like, it's amazing. Like, I just can't describe it. Thank you, Nate. And it's like, well, yeah, that's normal. That's what it is. It's like when you let go of all this drama, all this meaning, all this significance, the trauma bonds, all that stuff's gone. Vanish. Just out of existence. There's no trauma bond. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as a trauma bond. It doesn't exist. It's nothing but the same vicious circle. An objectified experience of my own not good enough, and I need someone to tell me, I need them to admit what they did or treat me better. Nothing more. That there is no level of not good enough, broken, abandoned, pain, suffering that comes from the narcissists themselves. They're only in your life because you have those types of thoughts and feelings. Therefore, you're compatible with that type of person. For the duration of time in which you manage yourself within that particular paradigm. That if you never felt not good enough or broken, or that there was something wrong with you, the moment that you got devalued the first time, you would have just got up and left. It just would have been, oh, oops, looks like I mistook you for someone else. My bad. And even then, you wouldn't have been susceptible to any of the bullshitting anyway. You wouldn't have cared about all the nonsensical, fluff and bullshit. You wouldn't be looking for a hero, a savior. You wouldn't be feeling incomplete enough to give a damn about what they thought, or it would just, you'd have no experiential basis for the relationship at all. And you would even notice the bullshit. It just, what you'd notice about a narcissist is the completely inauthentic things they say, that it wouldn't have a whole lot of sentimental value to have somebody talking to you as if they know you, or they think you're amazing, or you know because nobody would have any power to really make you feel different or special, because those types of conversations in your mind would be not present. So it's sort of like, for myself, when I've encountered narcissistic women in the wild, it was like really fascinating. I didn't understand that they were narcissists immediately, but it was like fun. I'm talking and meeting people, and then it's like somebody that's effusively trying to validate or acknowledge, and it was just very friendly, I guess. And it was just kind of, it was kind of meaningless. It was just not a necessary thing, for me. So, and then when they devalue or negate or anything like that, it was equally erroneous in a way that I would notice, like, I'm talking to this person and suddenly it's like they're being argumentative with facial expressions, and they're negating whatever I'm talking about after asking me something, like asking me my opinion, only to make funny faces and act like I'm saying something wrong or offensive even. And so I stopped talking. I'm like, it seems like you're being argumentative. And I found it unusual. I'm like, someone asked me what I think, I assume that they were interested in what I thought. So I was like, And what did she say? She's like, oh, well, everybody has an opinion. She said that to me, and I'm like, how weird. I'm sitting next to a woman at a bar who introduces herself and is very, seemingly interested, right? And so we're talking, and it's very friendly and lively, you know. And when she asked me, what do you think about masculinity and femininity in dating? I was like, oh, this is like at the beginning of me making TikTok videos. I might have had 500 people following me. Wow. Well, I was like, ooh, like a chance to talk. I was like, yay, I love talking. So, And so I started sharing my thoughts, and I was like excited, like I found someone to talk to. And there was a moment where I hit a wall, like I felt it. It was like hitting a wall, like it was where experientially I felt a resistance. And so I stopped. I was like I just noticed that, no, it was as if she was waiting for her, she wanted to interrupt. Like it was like she was acting as if I was talking over her, like she was offended by or so disagreeable with everything I was saying that it was like almost a ludicrousness to what I was saying. And it was like I thought I was saying something magical here, And so I stopped, and that's what she said. She was like, well, everybody has an opinion. I was like, well, yeah, that's certainly true. But you asked me for my opinion, right? I was like, if you didn't want my opinion, well, because if everybody has an opinion, don't ask, I guess, It's like, and then I said to her, I said, well, that's somewhat invalidating, right? Because you're telling me that you don't value what I have to say over anybody else in the world. You're making it known that There is nothing distinct or special about my thoughts or ideas that this guy outside pushing a shopping cart or anybody else in here could be equally as disinteresting to you. And I told her, I said, because if I am trying to get to know somebody, I ask them things because that just tells me how they think. I'm just sharing my world with you, that I'm just sharing with you something you asked me. And so that would help you understand who I am. And if I ask you your thoughts, it's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just you're telling me what you think. And then we could talk and share ideas. But it's because I'm interested in you as a person and that what you have to say to me tells me about the way you see your world. You're sharing your world with me, and I'm going to listen to you because I find that interesting. Then the way she responded, she said, well, I just don't agree with everything you had to say. It's like, that's even better. So you don't have to agree with anything. But he said, well, then what was it that I said that you didn't agree with? That right there told me everything because she said, well, I don't know, you just started rambling. You just started rambling. I don't even think you know what you were talking about, or something to that effect. I was like, that's interesting. Rambling. It's like rambling. It's like, well, I can assure you I wasn't rambling. That some of the things I talk about like this, it actually was a very developed thought process for me because I happened to be thinking about it the other day and I was excited to share my thoughts with you. Let me show you. And I restarted the entire conversation. I started right at the beginning. Went right back to the very beginning of when I started talking about masculinity and femininity and dating. Talking about the social construct, that I believe masculinity and femininity have been exaggerated for commercial purposes and constructs of identity that sell a lot of Victoria's Secret and perfume and, testosterone replacement and supplements and diesel trucks. And so it was and so what I did is I recreated the conversation up to the moment I stopped. And I just parked it on a dime. Boom. I said, now, what was it that I said there that you don't agree with? She grabbed someone, the dude that was there, this guy Chris, and she's like, do you see what he's doing? He's projecting right now. And I was like, oh, no, she did not. No, she didn't. Ooh, looks like we caught ourselves a narcissist. She has the terminology. And I was like, that is very fascinating that you would happen to say projecting. Because this looks like projecting. I didn't know people would projecting and triangulation at the same time. I was like, dude, let me show you my TikTok. And put her on timeout, just like, boop. I'm going to talk to him now. You just became a lot less interesting. So I was like, look, here's one on covert narcissist. And then after talking with him, then I turned to her. And I was like, oh, excuse me. Where were we? Projecting, right? What she started doing is she started praising me all the way to another level of divinity. Oh my God, you are just a genius. And I've never met somebody. You have to understand, it's so intimidating for a woman to meet a man with your intellectual capacity, the men around here. And I'm just looking at her. I'm like, good. And she stopped. And then she's like, I just can't believe it. Some guys just don't accept that to the woman's vulnerability it takes to open up and be vulnerable with you and And I'm just listening to her. And then she started getting upset. And I just can't believe that, and went right into a victim. And I was like, that is interesting. I was like, you're the victim. I just sat here and you started talking to me. You asked me what I thought. I started sharing my ideas. You appeared to be argumentative. You told me you didn't care about what I was talking about. My opinion's no more valid to you than anybody else. You didn't agree with anything I had to say, yet you didn't have anything to say about what I was talking about, which seemed like you weren't even listening. You didn't care what I was talking about. And now you're the victim. It's like, that's amazing. And she stopped and she was looking. Just stunned, you know? And then she just looked and she signed her receipt and then she just left. Just took off. I was like, yeah. It was funny. Came back to the same bar a few weeks later and it was like very busy around St. Patrick's Day. And I asked to sit with this family of people. It turned out to be a family of narcissists. It was really funny because the one woman that was really working on me, she worked in the dental industry. She started talking about my teeth. It was fun. But she was really trying to get at me, and it was funny. Like, I was having fun talking with her, but it was like she couldn't do anything to upset me. And eventually she just got very irritated. She got upset and just took off, just disappeared. I was like, where's she going? I thought what about my tooth? Are we gonna do Invisalign? Like, what are you saying? Sorry, was I supposed to get mad? You are interesting too. Come on. Don't be mad. Just because I don't react to you, just because you can't control me, I'm sorry, okay? Sorry. But it was really profound freedom where, having discernment in the moment and being free, like not needing the validation and not really feeling liable for other people's weird, nonsensical stuff. Like, I wasn't in any way trying to argue or be offensive. It was just being playful, but talking and realizing that these particular people have a profound need to control conversations with people and be able to influence or cause you to experience things that they want you to experience. They need to subordinate you, that they won't feel valid without being special or, something. And it's like, if you can notice or sort of see these types of behaviors, you kind of, it doesn't get a rise out of you. It's unremarkable. Like like, almost like you don't need validation or extra attention. And at the same time, you just don't really feel compelled by bullshit. So that's what's available. So for me, talking as somebody who has experienced like having my life destroyed on multiple occasions, it's like, geez whiz, like I could talk to a woman reasonably attractive, and rather than having a 3-4 year relationship or end up destroyed, watching a narcissist tuck their tail and lick their wounds, and I didn't have to do anything other than just communicate. It almost took me a minute to realize, wait a second, I think that's a female covert narcissist right there. Is when she said projection, when she literally, he's projecting. Like, projecting, I'm literally just talking about femininity and masculinity. Anyway, so I hope today's conversation about ontology and psychology. Ontology to me is the essence of being, just You know, there's a wide range of presentations of people with this disorder. Not all of them, I believe, I would categorize as evil per se, although they can all do some damage, you know. Because I think a lot of them are unaware, you know. Like I've talked to them because some of them seek coaching and they don't know. They don't know that they're narcissists. Because some of them, you know, actually authentically experience the victimhood that they project. That based on the emotional impermanence, they've always existed living entirely at the effect of the emotionality of other people. And so they do experience it in the ways in which they often communicate because they're dependent. They're totally codependent people, meaning they don't have the ability to manage and maintain their own beingness, that they are, you know, in perpetual anxiety and stress about belonging and fitting in. And so in that context, they often have profound confusion about what is causing the distress in their relationships, because they experience other people through their own emotional experience of themselves. And so they can't really bond in the same way. You know, they don't, you know, have the same types of codependent attachments, you know. And so when the relationships change or your emotionality changes, they experience that as a profound disappointment or letdown or sabotage or something. Because when you idealize them and you just meet them for the first time, they will feel really good. And you know, when you deviate or your emotions change or you have a bad day, then they experientially feel that too. You know, and what you'll know is that what I learned by observing my recent girlfriend experience was that why she collapsed into a 2-year-old in my presence when I was just being with her and observing her was that without any emotional, you know, indicators, without being able to understand my experience, like that's ultimately what they're always probing for, is they need to understand. Narcissists, especially coverts, always ask you how you're doing. How are you feeling? How are you? Because they need that. Because that's like, it's as if their mind is playing emotional chess involuntarily. You know, without that information, they cannot create the cognition of their next experience or how to be or how to respond to you. And so they get confused, they get lost. They can have almost an experiential collapse from gray rocking, but not gray rocking as a pretentious, you know, ignorance to, or not, you know, the avoidance of your own emotionality. You see, I wasn't gray rocking her like an effort. I didn't know anything about the disorder at all. I didn't know that it wasn't like I was gray rocking her on purpose. I was observing somebody that I did not recognize anymore and being in this state of bewilderment on my own, witnessing this person that I've known since I was 16 behave in a way that I had never witnessed. You know, she broke my cognitive dissonance through the lie that she told, the very last lie. It was perfect. Perfect. It was so sloppy that I could not, for the first time, stitch it. And so just observing her, and she made eye contact with me, looking at me, looking at her, with no reaction, no response to the bullshit she just said. And it was like, I watched her just literally shapeshift. I mean, it was watching a being change. It was like watching a soul leave the body. It was like whatever way she was acting, it was like she saw me, and it was like she collapsed. She became a traumatized 2-year old, a little girl. And I believe the reason she defaulted to that was the only remnants of any authentic self, that she had been living her whole life as a chameleon, an entire chameleon, all manufactured nonsensical behavior, all of it, not a single shred of authenticity with me. And now, in my presence, without me being emotional in any way, not positive, not depressed, not negative, not checked out, not oblivious, she couldn't hide in my company. Like, they can't hide in my company. You know, I make eye contact with a narcissist or psychopath. If I just am being with them, well, they're going to get seen. It's like putting a spotlight on a cockroach. That's what it's like. And I didn't know that. And so I just saw her change. Like, I saw her, and I couldn't leave, because I wasn't dealing with being jealous or brokenhearted because she cheated or anything like that. That was set aside for what is going on in my reality right now. How could I go, what is happening? I'm just watching. And I got goosebumps, because when this 2-year-old entity walked to me like a lost, abandoned, hurt, desperate child, she was pulling my shirt. She was trying to get me to kiss her. Kiss me, kiss me, kiss me, kiss me, please. Kiss me, kiss me, kiss me. And I was looking at her, and I was like, whoa. I felt repulsed. Like, it was like a vile experience. And I wasn't mad at her. I wasn't offended. I was experiencing what she was. And this was just what she is. Like, I'm like, okay, all right. I don't know if this girl's going to crawl in the TV set or walk backwards up the wall. What is this? Like, what is going on here? So I wasn't going to leave. I went and sat on the couch. Like, nothing's wrong. Just like, oh, okay. I was just like, yeah, not right now. Yeah, like, not gonna, let's not kiss at this second. Yeah, let me just go sit down. My whole reality is unraveling. I just need to sit down for whatever this is. And so I'm sitting down on her couch like this, because, well, she's talking to me, and she sits on me, and she sits next to me, and she like drapes her leg over, and she continues this effort to try to get me to, something. It's like trying to get something out of me. I was like, no. Yeah, no. Not right now. Hold on. Because what was happening in my mind, and this is the craziest thing I've ever experienced, by far, this led me to where we are today, was the entire relationship with her was rewinding in my head. It was like an expansion. It was like you're playing a game and it's like level 3 unlocked. It was like click, and it was all the memories that I had of her, every lie. It was like the cognitive dissonance fully broke, and my mind was unraveling the non-reality. And the most surprising dimension of this experience was that two things. For one, the memories were all clicking. It was like, you had an epiphany. You ever had an idea hit your head where it's just like a little light bulb go off? It was like a lightning storm. The whole relationship was unwinding, but it was unwinding in a way where, if I recall the recollection of the pieces of the memories that I was witnessing within my imagination, it was like I was in two different timelines, because I'm here having this happen in real time with her talking, but the clarity and the experience of the memories were experienced as if I was there, and I relived the 10-minute time frames of each segment. And so being able to say I relived the whole relationship, but my mind was so fast that it can do that whole process like that, where I can go now into each little piece of memory and tell you things that I didn't even see at the time in which the memories transpired. That I learned what cognitive dissonance was by having it revealed to me by myself. Now, how do you explain that? How I would explain it is that my own mind and my own perceptual awareness of the outside world was so much more expansive than I was aware of, that I was seeing reality the whole time of my life, that all these things in my life, I was there the whole time. I witnessed the lies, and I got to see how I concealed it from this version of myself. That me as an identity, Nate, had omitted those experiences, that I got to see how cognitive dissonance worked in my own imagination, that when I was having one of the memories happen, it was, the weekend before this weekend. Like this weekend where I'm sitting here with her and I'm witnessing whatever I'm, seeing with her. Well, the weekend before, I brought her coffee, and she was explaining that she had just gotten out of bed. And when I went into her room, there, was all her laundry was piled perfectly, like OCD style, on her bed. And she had her carry-out bag, kind of like an overnight bag that her toiletries were in. And she was in the mirror, and she was in pajamas, but it was apparent that nobody slept on this bed because the bed was made. She couldn't have just been getting out of bed, because she wouldn't have done, it just wasn't, it was just not, And I asked her, I was like, well, where did you sleep last night? And she did the same weird mannerisms that she did just now. And I saw the same pattern. And then she walked to the headboard and she crawled up onto the pillow on the bed, and the pillow was under the comforter. And I looked at it, and in my mind, I saw at the time, I thought, well, that's some weird bullshit. Like, she didn't sleep there. That's so silly. And right there when the betrayal hit, the emotions of betrayal had just started just when I tasted the bitterness, in my mind appeared her, that my brain, it conjured the idealized version of her. It wasn't just an image, it was a collage of reality. That the caricature of her in my imagination appeared. And it was like perfect credit score. It was my niece's lover. It was all the good things about her. Everything I loved about her. I trusted her. Like, she was a really solid person. Really great. Like, I would brag about her. And my mind compared that version of her, the idealized version, to what I was witnessing. And there's no way that the person I knew could, would be lying like that. She's just weird. She's just silly. So I would always make her silly. That's so silly. Why would you do that silly thing? And so my mind also recognized that I had her in my future. I also saw her in my future, that my attachment to her also was based on this perception of needing her stability as my bookkeeper. as somebody that would help. And I also was aware of the pain. I knew that everything was falling apart in my life, and this was like one of the last people. And so I didn't want to believe the truth. It was inconvenient. It would violate the future I was needing. I needed a future where I was succeeding. I needed a future where I was proving myself. I needed people that believed in me. She believed in me. And so I watched myself dismiss reality. Like, oh no. Like it was like I created, you're tripping, dog. Oh, dude, stop being silly, dude. Yeah. You got a trust issue, bro. And I let it go. And it was just like, oh, let's it's time to go to breakfast. And the moment I dismissed reality, I saw that I had done that 1,000 times. And I relived all of them. And I was reliving them all at one time. That's how powerful the mind is. Trillions of cells. Chat GPT fast. It reconstituted the whole relationship, and that all the suspicions or little inclinations, the little clues, the little, what you'd call intuitions, were on the money. On the money. And I got to see how I deceived myself. And, for the next 3 days, I wouldn't know if I call it an ego death, that I laid on my back on my bed. And my whole life, I did that. That I had to purge so many feelings that I didn't know were there. The betrayals, every relationship, best friends. I relived my whole life. I got to go into all of them. I got to see when I became analytical. I got to see myself in a kitchen, watching my malignant dad and mom fighting, seeing the violence, seeing my little brothers crying. And I remember the moment where it clicked, and I was like, I can understand my dad and my mom. And then I was free. Then I wasn't afraid anymore. Then I could understand them. And my ability to understand people was my salvation. It's what protected me from being hurt. It's what reconstitutes reality. It's what made betrayal invisible. It's what let me idealize people. Trying to protect my little brothers. And I would use that to talk my dad out of, killing our family. My parents divorced. My dad used to take us to shoot. Because when I first visited him at his new apartment in Downey by myself, he took me into his bedroom and he opened up his nightstand and he pulled out a couple of boxes. And he opened them and he handed me a gun. He's like, that's a .357 Magnum revolver. And he's handed me a bullet. He said, that's a hollow point. Here, I got this other one too. And he showed me a .22. And he said, I'm going to fix our family. The men at your mom's job that ruined our family, I'm going to kill them. And I understood he was going to do it, and so it was my job to talk him out of it. Because I understood that he was just hurting. I knew my dad was in pain. I knew that he had suffered loss in his life. I listened to his stories. I understood things that he loved always seemed to be taken from him. And he felt like he lost his family. And I didn't want him to lose his family. I'm here with my dad. And so he used to take me and my brother shooting. He would have us rehearsing, and he would have us talking about the names of the very people. It was as if he was training us to do it for him. And, you know, I'd watch him, and I'm watching like a 3-year-old little brother of mine shooting a 22, you know. I'm shooting a 357 Magnum with hollow points. He explained what they do to the body. And so he was planning that. And so my understanding in life came from that. You know, was it uncomfortable? Yeah, but you know, I wasn't afraid because I understood. And so having that kind of understanding in life, well, I could be with anything. And believe me, I have. And so, you know, that's what I saw, you know, I got to see all these things, you know, and having, you know, 43, 44 years of relationships with these types of people, yet always being on this ontological or experiential quest to self-discovery. I keep breaking myself apart, always forgiving and always willing to go again and again and again. You know, having my heart broken again and again, then coming back and coming back, you know, and so it really just was, you know, the final, the final battle, my Leviathan, you know, the final boss, you know, and that I had been always surrounded by these people, always, my entire life. They didn't know, had no idea. They were normal. My dad was just a jerk, you know, but he got better with age, you know, and I was always forgiven. You know, these things weren't even things that I considered traumatic. You know, they weren't things that I was upset about. It wasn't stuff where, Dad, if you wouldn't have done this, no, didn't have any of that. Didn't have any of that. I'm just lucky that I discovered narcissist as a term on TikTok, because after I kind of saw what I saw with my ex, I didn't have the terms to describe these people. Like, I could see for the first time that all these people were similar, that I was mistaken. I projected myself onto them, that I was the chief architect of my own deception. But I did that. Yeah. Didn't do it on purpose, you know. I didn't know. I didn't know, but I did, and that's the amazing thing about it. And so I didn't really even understand the implications of discovering all of this until even recently, because, you know, I just was using it and making videos and stuff. But, you know, in retrospect, you know, that experience with this woman was, you know, something that, you know, I couldn't change it. Meaning, if it didn't time out that way, if she didn't lie to me that day, if something was different, if I had broken up with her already, I could say with certainty, I don't believe I would have ever realized who I am or what I am, or really kind of gotten such a measure of completion in my life. You know, like I wouldn't have woken up the way that I have, you know. Most certainly wouldn't be, you know, constituting myself within a broader purpose to make a difference for other people. So I couldn't change any of it. I wouldn't. There's no chance. None. There wasn't anything about my past that I could alter, you know, and end up you know, believing that, like, I've, in a way, discovered not just something about myself, but something about people. That whatever it is I've discovered about myself is in no way, shape or form, about me. I mean, alone, it's understanding that the very mechanics of my own experience of being myself are entirely, you know, exactly what everybody else, experiences. And the only thing that, might make it distinct is just the stories, the circumstances. But in terms of the architecture of the mind, or the manner in which, we orchestrate our own experience of self, or the manner in which, our mind reframes reality to protect us emotionally, or to prevent us from ascertaining, more objective understanding of what's actually happening, is universal in nature. That for the rest of my life, I won't ever really need to distinguish myself, from others. The only thing that I would distinguish would be my experience, or awareness, and merely, as a way of acknowledging my responsibility as it pertains to sharing, my experiences in a manner that might make a difference. That if there would be any cause or reason for someone like me to have experienced the things that I've experienced, the only thing I could suggest would be to empower me to share. Because I couldn't come up with anything else. Nor would I need to. But, that's just something I elect to, believe or suggest. It's just, because that's what I want to do, make a difference for people. And so there isn't anything about, my experience that, is outside the world of what I would share, because there's really nothing to feel bad about. There's nothing to be ashamed of, nothing to regret. That in a way, we're all doing our best, even if we don't think so. We're trying to live our life, and it isn't easy. We're all born into this world, and we don't really know what we're doing. And nobody does. People are out here trying to find meaning. People are out here trying to figure it out, trying to discover themselves, trying to fix themselves, trying to overcome themselves, trying to make it make sense, or trying to make it, valid or purposeful or meaningful. But, the truth is that there really isn't any meaning to it. That, life absent what we have to say about it doesn't really have meaning. There's no meaning. That it is empty and meaningless. And that's what's beautiful. It's empty and meaningless. And it's empty and meaningless that it's empty and meaningless. And therefore, why worry? Just be, live your life. Do what fulfills you. That you got this gift and this opportunity. While you're still here and while you're breathing, you can be very grateful for the gift of life and find a way to just start letting go of all the significance and the things that you think about yourself. And be in the inquiry. Just be in consideration that there may be a little more to the picture of who you are, what you are, and what's possible. And, that's what I have to say. Hopefully, for those of you who, hung out, you enjoyed it or got something from it. For me, it's just, kind of an unbelievable thing, to think, 43 or 44 years, to be able to find myself and then help people find themselves in the same way I did, taking everything that I've learned and working to transform it into a conversation. I just feel, gratitude for the people that came before me that did the same. Because I know without those people, without the Alan Watts, the Werner Erhards, the Buddhas, the people that had some commitment to, addressing the experience of being a human being, that if I wasn't in some way exposed to that type of thought process, I don't know that I would be here today. I don't know that I would. I just, for me, I was so particularly afflicted that it would be hard for me to imagine, what life would look like if I just had stayed the same level of stuckness that I was in 2022. That it was, profoundly difficult, profoundly painful. A life of, just heartbreak, persistent angst, nagging inner knowing as if anything and everything good in my life could be lost in an instant, or, a drivenness to try to fix it, get it to work, get there, cross the finish line. Trying to finally get there. And to just, know that's really fascinating. I know, all the good people, like I took the class, like took the classes, the Landmark Forum and some of those transformational programs and coached in them in my 20s. And, that's what really, that and, some of the stuff I did in college, but, kind of looking back, somebody told me about Alan Watts recently. I didn't know who that was, but I looked it up and I was reading about him and I'm like, really fascinating. Really, really fascinating. Because I was like, wow, like the person that invented these transformational seminars, like, he had encountered Alan Watts, and they had conversations, and it's like, wow. I was reading a little bit about his philosophy. I want to read more because it's interesting, I feel like, if I was going to do anything, it would just be to try to take that stuff and, bring it to the world of psychology. Oh my gosh. So funny. Oh, deleting and hiding messages. Interesting. That's so funny. Old narcissist. Sad, sad, sad. Oh well. Good night, everybody. It was a great experience here. Appreciate you guys coming through. Looks like we're trying to get attention. Same old, same old. Wow. Yeah. All right, I love everybody here. I'll see you guys later. You have a beautiful and blessed night.